Forget everything Hollywood ever told you about pirates. The eye patches, the parrots, the walking of the plank, the lovable rogue in a feathered hat, finding buried treasure with a red X on a map. Almost all of it a carefully manufactured lie, built by novelists in the 1800s and turned into box office gold by movie studios who had zero interest in the truth. Because the truth is so much stranger and so much more fascinating. The real Golden Age of Piracy, roughly 1690 to 1730, wasn't about adventure-seeking romantics. It was about desperate, brilliant, furious men who had been ground down by the most powerful systems in the world. The Royal Navy, the merchant shipping trade, and the brutal plantation economy of the Caribbean. These were deserters, escaped indentured servants, runaway enslaved men, and discarded sailors. People who looked at the world they had been handed, looked at the life waiting for them, and made a cold calculation. They decided not this, and what they built instead, out on the open water, beyond the reach of kings and courts, was one of the most surprisingly organized, democratic, and brutally efficient micro-societies of the early 18th century. A floating civilization with its own laws, its own elections, its own HR department, and yes, its own disability insurance. Before most nations on Earth had any of that, today, we are going through every single role on a real pirate ship. How each one actually worked, why each one was critical, and why the truth, every dirty, democratic, terrifying part of it, is more interesting than any movie ever made about it. We are starting from the top, with the captain, and with the biggest myth of all. Let's get one thing absolutely clear first. A pirate ship was not a chaotic mob drifting across the ocean. It was a floating corporation. Every man had a specific job. Every job had specific rules. And if you failed at your job, you were not just a bad employee, you were a liability that could get every single person on board killed. The single biggest myth about pirates is the tyrannical captain. On a Royal Navy vessel or a merchant ship, the captain's word was absolute law. He could flog you, starve you, chain you below decks. And there was nothing you could do. Pirate captains were elected. Every man on board cast a vote. The cabin boy's vote counted exactly the same as the most seasoned sailor, and the captain could be removed, voted out, at any time for any reason. Cowardice, poor judgment, cruelty, or simply losing the crew's confidence. His actual authority was limited to two scenarios: active battle and a chase, whether pursuing a prize or fleeing a warship. Outside of those moments, the captain had remarkably little power. He couldn't punish crew members alone. He couldn't choose the ship's next destination without a crew vote. He ate the same food as everyone else. On many ships, he didn't even get a private cabin. Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart, captured over 400 ships, the most of any pirate in history. He maintained discipline through pure competence. His crew followed him because he made them rich. Edward Teach, Blackbeard, took a different approach entirely. He braided slow-burning fuses into his beard before battle, so he went into a fight wreathed in sulphurous smoke, looking like a demon ascending from hell. That image was strategic. It made enemy ships surrender without firing a shot, which meant less fighting, fewer injuries, and more profit for everyone. The pirate captain was not a king. He was a wartime CEO who served entirely at the pleasure of his shareholders. If the captain was the wartime leader, the quartermaster was the peacetime governor. And since pirates spent far more time sailing between prizes than actually fighting, the quartermaster ran the show the majority of the time. He settled disputes between crew members. He distributed food, drink, and supplies. He oversaw the division of plunder, inventorying every captured item and dividing it according to the ship's articles. He was also a hard check on the captain's power. If the captain tried to punish someone unfairly, the quartermaster could intervene. If the crew disagreed with the captain's decision, the quartermaster could call a vote to overturn it. Some historians have pointed out that this deliberate separation of powers, captain handling combat, quartermaster handling everything else, predates the formal constitutional structures of most Western democracies. Pirates were experimenting with representative government decades before the American Revolution. Below the captain and quartermaster, a tier of critical specialists kept the ship functional, armed, and alive. The bosun, the ship's foreman, maintained the rigging, sails, anchors, and hull. Every morning, he inspected the ship from stem to stern. A frayed line at the wrong moment in a storm could bring down a mast. A fallen mast in the open ocean was often a death sentence for the entire crew. He carried a silver whistle, whose different patterns served as the ship's entire communication system. The sailing master was arguably the most valuable man on board. Navigation in the early 1700s was extraordinarily difficult. No GPS, no radio, no satellite. He used dead reckoning, celestial observation, and hard-won experience to determine position. When pirates captured a ship, they often valued the navigator's charts and instruments more than the cargo. Good navigators were sometimes taken by force. Pirates recognized that navigation took years to master. The master gunner was responsible for the ship's entire artillery operation, maintaining cannons, storing gunpowder safely, training gun crews. His real expertise, though, was in pirate tactics. While navies aimed at hulls to sink enemy ships, pirates aimed high, at masts and rigging, to disable, not destroy. A sunken ship had no plunder to take. Chain shot. 2 cannonballs connected by a chain was a favorite weapon. It spun through the air and shredded sails like a flying scythe. The carpenter was the doctor who kept the ship itself alive. He patched and caulked the hull in an endless battle against leaks. Periodically, the entire ship had to be careened, run aground at high tide, tipped on its side when the tide went out, and scraped clean of barnacles and worm damage. While the carpenter worked as fast as possible, the ship was completely defenseless during careening, so armed lookouts were posted while he worked. Here is the reality of daily life on a pirate ship. It was mostly waiting. Endless, grinding, soul-destroying waiting. Weeks could pass between prizes. The crew spent those weeks in a tight wooden vessel in tropical heat with nothing to do but maintain the ship, stand watches, and try not to go insane. The food they had to sustain themselves through all of that. It was, by any modern standard, a nightmare. The staple was hardtack, a biscuit made from flour, water, and salt, baked until it had the structural integrity of a roof tile. It was so hard it could genuinely crack teeth. You had to soak it in coffee, beer, or whatever. Liquid was available just to make it chewable. After a few weeks at sea, hardtack became infested with weevils, small beetles that bored through the biscuit and laid eggs inside it. Experienced sailors learned a simple trick. Eat it in the dark. What you couldn't see couldn't ruin your appetite. The primary protein was salted beef or pork, packed in barrels of brine. It had to be soaked for hours before cooking to draw out enough salt to make it edible. Even then, the texture was somewhere between leather and cardboard. Sailors were not eating well. They were eating to stay alive. Sea turtles were the great exception, a genuine Caribbean pirate delicacy. They could be kept alive on deck for weeks, providing fresh meat on demand. When a ship took a prize or stopped at a friendly port, fresh provisions transformed everything. Fresh water stored in wooden casks turned brackish and foul within days. It grew algae. It smelled. Left with no choice, pirates drank grog, a mixture of water, rum, and lime juice, as their primary daily beverage. This wasn't just a preference. It was survival chemistry. The alcohol in the rum killed most of the bacteria growing in the stale water and the lime juice, though nobody understood the science at the time, prevented scurvy. Without vitamin C, a crew could begin losing teeth, seeing old wounds reopen, and experiencing joint failure within weeks. On long voyages, scurvy had killed entire crews. The ship's cook controlled all of this. Often an older sailor or a man disabled in battle, who could no longer climb rigging. The cook was the ship's morale officer. His ability to make bad ingredients into something edible on a fire-prone pitching deck was genuinely valued by the crew. Every serious pirate ship had musicians, and their role was entirely practical. During battle, drums, fifes, and trumpets coordinated boarding actions, signaling when to fire, when to charge, when to hold. They also served as psychological warfare, the noise designed to terrify defenders on the target ship. Outside of battle, music was essential for morale and for work. Shanties coordinated group tasks like hauling anchors, the rhythm keeping 30 men pulling at exactly the same moment. Musicians were so valued that many pirate articles listed them as protected crew members, the only people entitled to a mandatory rest day. We are about to get into the Pirate Code, which was, genuinely, one of the most progressive legal documents of the 18th century. But before we do, if this kind of deep dive into history is hitting for you, hit subscribe. We do this for Void Bilge every week. Real history. No fluff, no myths. Also, I need to know. Drop a comment right now. If you were on a pirate ship, what would your role be? Personally, I'd be the one guarding the rum. I'd be terrible at navigation. I'd absolutely refuse to climb the mast. But the rum? the rum would be safe. Like the video if you're enjoying it. It genuinely helps more people find this content. Now, the pirate code. Before any pirate ship left harbor on a new voyage, every single member of the crew gathered on deck. And they wrote a contract. They called it the Articles of Agreement. And it was, in every meaningful sense, Constitution. It covered the division of plunder, exact shares for every rank, spelled out in fractions. It covered discipline, specific offenses, specific punishments. It covered behavior on board. And it covered something that sounds almost impossibly modern for the early 1700s: compensation for injuries sustained in service. Every man signed the articles before the voyage began. No signature, no share of the plunder. By signing, you agreed to be bound by the rules, and you were guaranteed your portion of whatever was taken. A common sailor received 1 share. The captain received 1.5 to 2 shares. The quartermaster, 1 1/4. Specialists. The surgeon, master gunner, carpenter, 1 1/4. The difference between the lowest and highest paid member of the crew was tiny by any standard of the era. Compare that to a merchant vessel, where the captain and ship's owners took the vast majority of profit, while sailors received a fixed pittance regardless of how successful the voyage was. Here is the part that genuinely stops people cold. Pirates had disability insurance. The Articles of Bartholomew Roberts, one of the most detailed surviving examples, specified that a man who lost his right arm in battle received 600 pieces of 8 or 6 enslaved people. A lost leg the same. A lost eye or finger earned 100 pieces of 8 from the common chest. This compensation existed, not because pirates were sentimental, but because it was practical. It incentivized men to fight hard, without fear of being abandoned if they were wounded. This system of guaranteed injury compensation would not become standard practice in legitimate employment for another 2 centuries. Standard rules also prohibited gambling for money on board, banned open flames below decks after a certain hour, and required disputes to be settled on shore, never on the ship, where a fight between crew members endangered everyone. It was a social contract. Rough, imperfect, sometimes violent, but a genuine social contract created collectively, agreed to voluntarily, and enforced by the entire crew. When a fight finally happened, it was not a glorious duel. It was not the choreographed sword fights you've seen in every pirate movie. It was close quarters chaos, over in minutes, with no room for error and no room for cowards. But here is the thing. Pirates preferred not to fight. Every battle meant damage to their own ship, injuries, and deaths among their crew. The risk that the prize itself would be damaged or sunk in the exchange. A sunken ship had nothing to plunder. So pirates built their entire strategy around not having to fight. The Black Flag, the Jolly Roger, was not just a symbol. It was a calculated psychological weapon. Flying the Jolly Roger sent a very specific message to the target ship. Surrender now, and everyone lives. Everyone gets to go home. Fight back, and we raise the red flag, which meant no quarter, no prisoners. Everyone dies. Most merchant ships surrendered immediately. Their captains were businessmen, not soldiers. The cargo was insured. The lives of the crew were not. Faced with a pirate ship flying black, with gun ports open and crew visible, the rational choice was surrender. Pirates understood this. They counted on it. It was their entire business model. When battle was unavoidable, the master gunner directed tactics that were completely unlike standard naval warfare. Naval ships aimed at each other's hulls to sink them. Pirates aimed high, at masts, rigging, and sails, to disable without destroying. Chain shot shredded the enemy's ability to move or flee. Grape shot, bags of small iron balls, swept defenders off the deck right before boarding. Stink pots, ceramic jars of burning sulfur, created choking clouds of smoke that drove fighters from their positions. Then came the boarding. Grappling hooks thrown across the gap, planks dropped between hulls, men crossing over in smoke and chaos. This was the part that killed people. Not cannon fire at distance, but hand-to-hand combat on a pitching deck. Cutlass and pistol at arm's reach. The truth about life on a pirate ship is that you were always one storm or one miscalculation away from the bottom of the ocean. The sea didn't care about your articles. The sea didn't care about your vote. So, was it worth it? For most of them, no. Most pirates died young, executed in port, killed in battle, drowned in storms, taken by disease in the tropics. The Golden Age of Piracy lasted roughly 40 years before the British Navy hunted it nearly to extinction. The men who lived it mostly didn't live long, but for those years, for that window, they built something the empires chasing them could not offer. A common sailor on a merchant vessel in 1715 was a man with no vote, no rights, no guaranteed compensation if he was injured, and no meaningful share of the profits from the voyage his body made possible. A common sailor on a pirate ship had a vote in every major decision, a fair and guaranteed share of the plunder. Disability, compensation, written into a contract he had helped draft. A captain he had elected and could remove. The ability, the actual legal right within his own society, to look the most powerful person on the ship in the eye and say, "I voted for you, and I can vote you out." They were not heroes. Many of them did terrible things. The Golden Age of Piracy existed inside the same world as the transatlantic slave trade, and the relationship between piracy and that system is complicated and dark. These were not saints with black flags, but they were people, real, specific, desperate, brilliant, flawed people who looked at the world they had been handed and decided to build something else. Next time you see a pirate in a movie, the clean clothes, the dramatic entrance, the buried treasure, remember what they're replacing. Remember the weevils in the hardtack, the elected captain eating the same food as the cabin boy, the articles signed by every man before the voyage began, guaranteeing shares and rights and compensation for the loss of an arm. The powder monkey, 11 years old, running barefoot across a deck slick with seawater, carrying gunpowder charges past firing cannons. That's the real story. That's what life on a pirate ship actually looked like. Thanks for watching Void Bilge. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next voyage.